Hi there and welcome to Capital View. This weekend, Prime Minister Narendra Modi heads to Bangladesh, where he will be signing a landmark land boundary agreement. We're also learning that in the coming days, the Prime Minister will be heading to Israel, the first time an Indian Prime Minister will be visiting that particular country. We're asking on this episode of Capital View, is foreign policy key to Modi's Prime Ministership? Joining me, former diplomat Shiv Shankar Mukherjee, Seshadri Chari of the BJP and Sanjay of the Congress Party. Seshadri Chari, let's put it across to you in the beginning. You know, a lot of Mr. Modi's initiatives, it could be said, is simply continuity. After all, the land boundary agreement with Bangladesh is a UPA initiative. The opening up to the US had happened in the time of Mr. Manmohan Singh, also before that in the time of Mr. Vajpayee. So it could be said that foreign policy is simply a case of continuity with the previous government.
No, you cannot say everything that Modi has done so far as the foreign policy issue is concerned is a continuity of the former thing. You know, unlike economic policy or education policy, you cannot have a 10-year, 5-year foreign policy, 10-year foreign policy. It's a constantly evolving thing. And in foreign policy matters, generally what happens is you have to seize the situation, you have to look at the situation, you have to seize the opportunity and act. The earlier government had a lot of opportunities, but it did not act on a number of things.
Sanjay Jha of the Congress, the fact is that your government was simply too hobbled by the coalition partners to have this kind of decisive foreign policy.
I think if you have to judge the Prime Minister on his foreign policy, you have to judge him by the neighborhood management really, because it's really with Pakistan and China that you can see whether he has made any tangible progress or have we in fact gone backwards. The fact that today you have Pakistani flags being openly demonstrated in Srinagar, I think tells you that on Pakistan there is the flip-flop of Mr. Modi from the time he invited the Prime Ministers down to the abrupt cancellation of the Foreign Secretary talks. I think it was all frankly boomeranged and not gone positively at all.
Shiv Mukherjee.
I'm a chess player, so in chess there's a fundamental rule that you don't start looking for dazzling combinations and sacrifices and a mating set of moves right in the beginning. You're supposed to develop your pieces. The fundamental rule is you position yourself well and the rest follows. Prime Minister Modi has shown 2 or 3 things. One is a huge energy. He has put a huge amount of energy into the pursuit of foreign policy, which is incidentally the pursuit of national interest. Foreign policy, if it is anything, is the pursuit of national interest in our interaction with the rest of the world. He is positioning himself. Those who ask that, look, he went to China, what did he come back with? The Prime Minister of India does not go with a shopping list and a shopping bag. He is positioning a very large country which has a place in the world. He's positioning that country. If you take Japan, Australia, there's a thought behind it. There's a strategic thought behind it. It's not as though these countries are going to promptly rush to India's rescue if we have a problem with China. But this is, as in chess, a positioning himself.
Right.
He goes to Seychelles and Mauritius to show India's presence, its upasthiti, as we say, in the southwest Indian Ocean.
Is Modi pursuing a Pakistan minus SAARC policy, visiting every SAARC country but ignoring Pakistan?
When you're dealing with Pakistan, you're not just dealing with one country, you are dealing with US, you are dealing with Chinese interests, you are dealing with Japanese interests, you are dealing with European Union interest, you are dealing with West Asian interest, you are dealing with China's interest. So it's a combination of different various interests that is playing in Pakistan, number one. Number two, when Pakistan is an important part of SAARC, you cannot do without Pakistan as far as SAARC is concerned. At the same time, you will have to send signals to Pakistan that you cannot hold up the progress that SAARC is able to make or will be able to make. This we have not been able to tell Pakistan all these years. But now a very decisive Prime Minister has point blank sent that signal to Pakistan.
But what are the pros and cons of that policy?
If you don't without you, and if you oppose in spite of you, SAARC will progress.
In big ticket issues like connectivity and trade and so on, Pakistan has always been an obstacle because of its one-point obsession of doing whatever it can to harm India or to not agree with whatever India says, even if it's very good for the region. But SAARC, therefore, by the way, has officially allowed some time ago for sub-regional initiatives. So if we go ahead with an initiative, as Mr. Siddharth Chari was saying, that does not include Pakistan, with.
But how viable is that? How viable?
I think it is very.
is
There is a BBIM initiative.
Pakistan is a, if you look at SARC, there is a eastern sector and a western sector. Pakistan is the only country on the western sector, whereas the rest of the SARC initiatives are all with east. So with a very robust lookist policy, with a very robust Indian Ocean policy, and also with a very competitive economic edge that India has as far as the eastern region is concerned, I think we can do this. This is doable.
Sanjay Jha, isn't this a welcome, refreshing break from the past? Rather than get bogged down in the endless Indo-Pak dialogue, here is a Prime Minister who's actually saying SARC is going to take off, perhaps minus Pakistan. If Pakistan doesn't want to be part of the action, too bad for Pakistan.
You can't have SARC -1 or -2. The truth of the matter is that today, if you look at the flip-flop, the sudden cancellation of the foreign secretary talks, and then actually the truth is that you had a subsequent visit by the Indian foreign secretary to Islamabad because there was a lot of pressure from the United States. Don't forget, for all the Bonhomian bromance that Mr. Modi tried to do by calling the US President Barack when he was here last time for the Republic Day, President Obama went back and signed a $955 million financial aid to Pakistan, which included military purchases and other defense equipment. So there is a larger strategic need that United States has for Pakistan, and perhaps more so because of the withdrawal of the troops from Afghanistan.
Our entire foreign policy negotiations and entire foreign policy doctrine cannot be subjected to how we handle Pakistan alone. It was in fact the first Congress Prime Minister, Mr. Narasimha Rao, who took a foreign policy in such a manner that he kept Pakistan away and he looked at lookist policy.
Ever since you have had a change of leadership in Afghanistan, you will find a significant alliance emerging. I mean, there was an item about Afghanistan and Pakistan sharing intelligence. And I think to that extent, these are diplomatic issues that India needs to be very, very concerned about.
When Mr. Narasimha Rao, it's not been in the media, when he met Bill Clinton for a 1 hour and 10-minute one-on-one long ago, he did not mention the word Pakistan once.
Let's look at the Bangladesh. I mean, Mr. Modi is going to Bangladesh. Now, this is a very important agreement, the land boundary agreement.
India's northeast becomes the gateway. And if India's northeast has to become a gateway, it has to be infrastructurally strong and supportive. For that, we require Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a very important area of strategic area for us from this point of view. So we have to have very good road connectivity. We have to have very good train connectivity. India's eastern sectors are all added to Bangladesh. So that we have to do, number one. Number two, internal situation in Bangladesh also has to be taken care of.
Right.
We cannot allow Bangladesh to become another radical country.
Sanjay, respond to that. Mamata Banerjee is on board this time in the reach out to Bangladesh. Now, that's very, very significant given that she held up actually the Teesta Water Agreement of the Manmohan Singh government. This time, Modi is taking her along.
Well, Sagarika, frankly, national interests precede any political parochial interest at all. I think the important thing that we need to recognize is that there have been excellent diplomatic relationships between India and Bangladesh, especially during the time of the UPA. The entire land boundary agreement, as you rightly said at the beginning of the program, has been constructed by Dr. Manmohan Singh. At one point, I thought politically Mr. Modi was very critical of it, but as you rightly said, when you assume power, you've got to be pragmatic, you've got to be flexible, and I'm glad that Mr. Modi has finally acknowledged that you have to go with an agreement which is actually in the mutual interest of both countries. I think the critical issue will be on Teesta water sharing because, as I think somebody else mentioned on your panel earlier, if India has to really create a better infrastructure for the Northeast, and there are massive economic and trade advantages for India, then you need to get Bangladesh on board. And therefore, on the Teesta sharing, which is I think vital to Bangladesh as well, if we make progress, even though an agreement is not formally signed because there may be some complexities, but if we make substantial progress, then it will definitely be in the diplomatic interest of both nations. It doesn't matter whether Mr. Modi is a prime minister, but if it is in India's and Bangladesh's interest, I think good progress will be a good sign for both countries.
Let me just ask you to wrap up on SARC. We've had the huge rescue effort in Nepal. We've now got this land boundary agreement going on with Bangladesh. Mr. Modi has gone to Sri Lanka. So SARC is really, is it now really, can we say that it's one of Mr. Modi's priority areas? So a few general comments on SARC and a few comments on Bangladesh and what this deal will mean.
Well, on SARC, may I just remind Sanjay very gently, I don't want to make him uncomfortable, but the initiative to go ahead with interaction with economic projects and other projects with our neighbors minus Pakistan actually started before Prime Minister Modi took over, and it was a very good thing when it started under the previous government. We have the BBIM initiative, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Myanmar. We have the Bay of Bengal initiative, and this is under under SARC. Sub-regional cooperation was allowed, and we should continue with it because we cannot let SARC forget SARC umbrella for the moment. We cannot let our interaction with our neighbors and the very important questions of security, connectivity, and so on be hijacked by one intransigent nation for whatever reason.
And what do you think we've achieved in, just before you come to Bangladesh, what do you think we've achieved in Nepal by that massive rescue
I think
effort?
we've achieved a remarkable amount of goodwill, not just in terms of what we did for that disaster that struck that country. We did extremely well.
We haven't stoked fears of the Big Brother.
But even before that,
we haven't stoked fears of Big Brother coming in and trying to
that I think is something we should not give too much importance to. I've served there for 4 years. There is a situation there. I can go expanding on that, but we won't have the time. But let me assure you that the anti-Indian noises that are being made there are not backed by a real depth of anti-Indian feeling by the Nepali people. It's quite the opposite. Politicians will make noises to capture a few votes. Anti-Indianism was made the equal thing as far as nationalism was concerned by a succession of Shahs and Ranas. it's a different Nepal, and the people of Nepal, by and large, know very well that what India means to them. So and Prime Minister Modi's visit to Nepal, coming after 17 years when no Prime Minister visited, was, I think, on a bilateral basis, was, I think, an exceptional success, and my Nepali friends assure me of that.
Right.
So in terms of interaction with the neighbors, he has done very well. In terms of SARC, I think he's taken a somewhat cold-blooded view that I will support it in rhetoric and substance, if allowed to. If not, I will go ahead with my interaction anyway without Pakistan.
Right. So a very pragmatic approach to SARC. Sanjay, you wanted to come in. You were. Do you believe that in fact the effort in Nepal has resulted in India having a kind of Big Brother image there in Nepal? Has the line between aid and the overweening Indian nationalism threatening other SARC nationalisms, has that been stoked?
You know, Sagarika, frankly, I thought there was a huge negative fallout, and it was not just in social media. I think there was concern within Nepal, and I heard it from many people that, there was an attitude which was very condescending. I mean, people can differ on it, but that's a reality that we should not ignore.
That was only from the media.
The second point is SARC does facilitate
from an insensitive young media
cooperation, which is a very good thing. But
there
again, once again, it doesn't stop any country from a stronger bilateral relationship.
Right. You want to come in there?
More importantly, I think we have held out very well with Nepal and Bhutan also to a very large extent. But don't forget, it was during one of the Congress regimes that we had one of the worst relationship with Nepal, and surprisingly, during Manmohan Singh, we had a very tough time with even a country like Bhutan. Indian Oil Corporation virtually wanted to starve Bhutan of oil. I mean, these things are not done in foreign policy, especially with neighbors. This is not the way. And when I spoke about grabbing opportunity, Dr. Manmohan Singh was invited to Sri Lanka during the 50 years of...
But he could not go, I think, because of the DMK.
Not go because of DMK. It's not the question of not going there. But the then Foreign Minister Salman Khurshid himself, who went there, said, I wish my Prime Minister was here. And then we gave that opportunity of visiting the Tamil areas first. The first Prime Minister ever to go to Tamil areas was the British Prime Minister, not the Indian Prime Minister.
So what is clear in fact...
This is the kind of opportunity that we handed over to others. And therefore, what I am trying to say is, here is a Prime Minister who is proactive on all these things. He grabs the opportunities and he makes a clean
grabbing opportunities, and right from, I think, inviting the SARC heads of government to his swearing in, Mr. Modi has shown a huge interest in SARC. Let's take a short break at this point and come back with lots more on Mr. Modi's foreign policy on the other side. Welcome back to Capital View. Yes, Prime Minister Modi is heading to Bangladesh. We're hearing that he's also going to visit Israel, the first Indian Prime Minister to do so. We're asking, is foreign policy key to the Modi Prime Ministership? Modi's outreach to China. Now, on the one hand, gestures of friendship, business contacts, asking for investment, but on the other hand, also perhaps demonstrating to some extent India's strategic interest in our region, in the Indian Ocean region. So do you believe it's a mix of both, or is Mr. Modi selling out to China or not demonstrating India's strategic interest enough?
China, I think, in many senses, is our #1 foreign policy challenge. And you are very right in pointing out the on the one hand and on the other hand kind of approach, because that is the only way to tackle China. We have, as our northern neighbor, one of the most powerful countries in the world, 5 times India's economy, a huge military power.
It's poised to become the most powerful economy in the world.
Potentially that, and a country with, in partnership with which we can gain hugely.
When Xi Jinping visited India, that was the time when the border incursions were actually going on.
That's right.
And the charge against Mr. Modi was that he didn't bring it up.
It was brought up, it was even reported also. The Prime Minister raised that issue. You know, with China, what we have is, we have a situation of confrontation, cooperation and competition with China all at the same time. We have a border issue, at the same time we have to cooperate, and we have been cooperating with China, and China and India have been acting together on number of issues like even global warming and other issues.
We have been working
most people
together. Don't know
yeah.
the Chinese border with India has been the most peaceful border that we have over the last 25-30 years.
And
There's been one death, that's it.
And as
But
far
there
as
are the continuing skirmishes
yes,
over territory.
those are the irritants we have to tackle, and that's the border problem.
But you can't expect an Indian Prime Minister not to take up those irritants.
And therefore he did. He's
Then
the
he
first
did-
Prime
he
Minister
But did he
who
take it up
publicly-
strongly enough
He took
when
two-
Mr. Xi Jinping was
no,
here?
he took two very, that was not only that.
Because it happened
It's so
while
much
Mr. Xi Jinping was here.
So much so that the visiting president had to go back and ask his own army what happened at that time. This was not reported in Indian press. It was reported in the world press. It was reported in the Chinese press also. A day before Modi left for China, he called the Chinese ambassador, and we have told him that we do not appreciate China signing an agreement in POK for development of infrastructure, and Pakistan occupied Kashmir cannot be treated as a part of Pakistan, and we do not appreciate. We have point blank told Chinese side that this is unacceptable, and even on the Chinese soil the Prime Minister has made it very clear that if you continue to issue staple visas to people from Arunachal Pradesh, we will issue staple visas to all Tibetans who are visiting India.
Look at how China is really expanding its global footprint. Take Afghanistan, for example. There are already reports that China is actually having close conversations with the Taliban there. Pakistan and China are getting increasingly close together, and they will probably be playing a greater and a more influential role in Afghanistan. Now, these are challenges that India will have to somewhere down the line recognize. I believe Mr. Modi, in all honesty, made a tactless error when he went to visit Japan and to make a comment on a third country, which is never really done. I've followed politics very closely, but when you visit one country, you don't comment on another. But he did make a comment on the expansionist Chinese policy, or basically on the South China Sea.
He said that in Japan.
Now everybody knows that Japan and China have a historical animosity which runs fairly deep, actually, despite their trade volumes being high. And I do believe that that was a message that the Chinese president was sending when he was in the Jhula having dhokla with Mr. Modi, that the military superiority of China cannot be ignored. And like it or not, although Mr. Mukherjee believes it's been a peaceful territory because we haven't had a war in a formal sense, but the truth is the skirmishes are a warning.
On the issue of the United States, do you think Mr. Modi there has shown really extreme pragmatism? The country that denied him a visa, he actually invited the president to come and be a guest at our Republic Day, and in the sense that showed a certain nimbleness and a certain pragmatism.
I agree on both those counts. It showed not only nimbleness of mind and pragmatism in the truest sense of the word, in the sense that he did not let any personal feelings he may have had get in the way of pursuing the national interest.
A lot of eyebrows were raised when the President of the United States, actually in his last speech at Chari Fort, literally lashed out at India about religious intolerance.
3 things. Number one, the President of USA has a prerogative to speak his mind openly, and India is not a communist country, it's a free country, and the President was a guest here.
That was a very strong statement that Obama made.
He was a guest here and he was free to say that. Whether we agree with it or not is different, number one. Number two, everyone saw the hollowness of what the President is speaking. either here or in his own country or
No,
from here when he went back.
that's a matter of
when he
interpretation. I'm saying, but the fact is he said it.
Same way, it is a matter of interpretation. That was his interpretation, which we did not agree. We have sent very strong, clear signals that look, this is not the way you can do it. And there have been criticism of the president in his own country also for what he said here.
When Mr. Modi went to America, he was, in fact, given rock star treatment at the Madison Square Garden. He was given a full state welcome. He was given a massively important reception over there. So the fact is that the US has recognized its error and its mistake in denying Mr. Modi a visa and has actually welcomed him with open arms, whatever the irritants may be about religious intolerance.
America looks at attractive destinations for the huge capital it has. India is a big emerging market story after China, and it's very logical. If the president came a second time, let me assure you, there is a huge pressure. America has hit a growth trajectory, and they want to build on it. So, it's not built for any personal chemistry. It's built for a pure national interest like we have. So does America. I think the truth is that
Whoever
Dr.
the Prime Minister would be, America would reach out.
No, I do believe that Mr. Modi has used a lot of his foreign visits for his own personal and political profiling back home.
Let's come now to the other question that characterizes Mr. Modi's foreign policy, which is, of course, the leveraging of the diaspora. Now, we've seen in every city, whether it's New York, whether it's Shanghai, whether it's Seoul, whether it's in Canada, Mr. Modi has this huge connect with the diaspora and he leverages it well. Is this something very new for a Prime Minister?
It's not new. I can say from my own experience that just about every government sends out messages to our embassies to interact with the Indian community wherever it exists in large numbers. We ourselves, I mean, any country would, a country like India with a 25 million strong Indian community abroad would interact with them. They form a bridge between the country of their adoption and the country of their origin. Today, the Indian community sends back something like $70 billion in remittances to this country. So the importance of the community is self-evident.
The idea of engaging with PIO, people of Indian origin, more than the NRI, was first conceived and started during the Vajpayee regime. And that was the time when we started observing this Pravasi Bharatiya Divas and so many other things. And also the diaspora everywhere has always been hankering, and they have been looking forward to Prime Minister's visit. They have been looking forward to India's engagement. They have been looking forward to the government rolling out some sort of a hand of friendship towards all of them, especially the PIO community.
Has the Congress traditionally, Sanjay Jha, ignored the diaspora and not given the NRI and the PIOs the kind of importance that they seek, and therefore Mr. Modi is addressing a historic lacune?
Well, Sagarika, different political leaders have their own individualistic styles. There's no denying that Mr. Modi is a very flamboyant leader. He indulges in a lot of rhetoric. There's a lot of melodrama. There's a lot of public relations work. I mean, he's entitled to that. He's using it, and fair enough. But the point is that if you look at the facts and figures, I mean, Dr. Manmohan Singh was a restrained, a far more reticent person. But ultimately, as an NRI, I used to handle an NRI desk for a foreign bank before. I can tell you NRIs are like any multinational investors. They will put money in an FCNR deposit, or they will put money in a greenfield venture if it's easy to do business.
They're seeing a good business proposition in Modi.
If the returns are good.
At the very end of the program,
it's not just business.
At the very end
of the
program,
return.
We're completely out of time.
NRI and PIO are not just business. NRI may be an economic concept, but PIO is more of a cultural concept, and people of Indian origin really represent the culture of India.
Right,
and I think that is where they are able to build a bridge between the country of their adoption and the country of their origin.
Right, we're at the very end of the program. I'm going to wrap up with a few comments. Is the Arab world the big missing link in this jigsaw? Should Mr. Modi's next step now be perhaps a visit to Saudi Arabia, reach out to the Gulf?
Well, it stands to reason that the Gulf is an extremely important part and should play an extremely important part in our priorities. After all, the very fact that there are millions of Indians working there, a huge chunk of our energy security is linked to the Gulf. So in terms of the security of our nationals, which is our #1 priority in diplomacy really, in terms of our energy security, in terms of the international waters and so on, the Gulf is of preeminent importance. But do we have a role in West Asia? My personal feeling is, in terms of in terms of our principal positions, we have not changed, and we are, I think, on the right track in the support of our Palestinian cause.
We're maintaining our continuity in support of Palestine,
which we have insisted is
even
not
though Mr.
diluted
Modi is
with
now
our
here in
relationship
Israel.
with Israel.
Right.
West
But we
Asia-
don't have a real role to play.
We
No,
don't
West
have a
Asia,
role
of
to
course,
play.
Of course, we don't have a very great role to play, but West Asia is an important country as far as energy is concerned. So is Africa. So I think the next stage of foreign policy
Has to be
and
the Arab
next
world.
phase of all these things will be not only West Asia but also our engagement with Africa,
With
which has
Africa
got
and West
54
Asia has to be our
countries.
next engagement. Sanjay ji, very quickly. Very quickly.
Sharika, there are 7 million Indian diaspora in the Gulf, in the Middle East, and I think it's important because they are the ones who send maximum remittances to India on a more regular basis, and they are not the affluent, well-established ones like you have in the Western countries of the US. So Mr. Modi cannot and should not ignore the Gulf nations at all. Besides, of course, strengthening our diplomatic relationships, which have traditionally been very strong.
Right, we're going to have to leave it there. Mr. Modi has brought tremendous energy to foreign policy. He's visited 18 countries in 1 year. He's now heading to Bangladesh to sign a landmark agreement over there. Relations with SAARC are being put on the fast track. But, however, the Gulf and the Arab world remain a missing piece in the entire jigsaw. Only the future will tell whether that too will be bridged. Thank you very much indeed to all my panelists for joining me. And if you have been watching, thank you and see you again next week.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.